I heard my son's voice before I ever stepped onto that ship. That is the part people forget when they talk about intuition. About the way danger sometimes announces itself before it takes shape. I was standing in my own doorway, keys still in my hand, when his voice carried through the living room, too calm, too rehearsed. "It's a one-way ticket," he said. "When he's at sea, it'll look like an accident. Nobody questions an old man who falls overboard." That was the moment the ground under me tilted. Not when I boarded the ship, not when I read the forged papers later. Right there, behind that door, hearing my son describe the end of my life like he was confirming a reservation. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The words settled into the quiet of my house, like dust, like they had been waiting there. And in that breathless minute, I understood two things with absolute clarity. My son did not expect me to hear him. And if I pretended I had not, I might still have a chance to live. I stepped back, slow and controlled, folded myself into silence the way an old man folds into a winter coat. I put my medication in my pocket, not because I needed it, but because holding something solid kept my hands from shaking. Then I walked out. I closed the door softly behind me and carried the envelope, his gift, like a piece of evidence. By the time I reached the dock in Portland, the world had rearranged itself. People moved around me with the ease of vacationers, but I felt like a man walking into a story already written. The attendant smiled the way strangers do when they think your life is simple. She placed the boarding pass in my hand. "Your son must love you very much," she said. I nodded and let the lie sit between us. The ship towered above me, white against the blue, smelling of fresh paint and salt. A floating city. A stage. A trap. I stepped inside anyway, not because I trusted what waited, but because running would leave no record, no proof. Inside the cabin, the quiet felt heavier. The balcony door opened to a horizon too wide and too calm for what I carried. I set the suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse ticking in time with the old watch in my pocket. Gratitude wasn't going to save me. Evidence might. That was the only truth left. I pulled out an old contact card I had kept tucked in my wallet for emergencies. Detective Walker. My thumb hovered only once before I called. When he answered, something in me steadied. "You did the right thing," he said after hearing the line about the one-way ticket. "Do not confront him. Do not travel home. Gather proof." So I walked the ship slowly, the way older men walk when they want to be unnoticed. I noted the cameras, the blind spots, the corners where shadows lingered longer than they should. I found the library computers and sent the detective a photo of the tickets with 3 words. I heard him. His reply came back almost instantly. "Keep everything. Record everything. Do not assume anything is safe." I spent that afternoon watching faces, memorizing patterns. The man in the green shirt, who kept glancing my way at lunch. The woman who looked past me too quickly when I turned. The hum of suspicion growing louder the longer I listened. And then, during a quiet meal, I met the older man who would become my first ally. A retired lawyer traveling alone. Calm. Observant. The kind of man who recognized fear because he had lived through his own. "You don't look like a man on vacation," he said. I told him just enough to make him stay. He didn't flinch. "Then we document," he said. Step by step. That night, as the ship carved a path through a black ocean lit only by stars, I lay awake, listening to the ticking of the old watch, the one my wife had given me. The sound that always reminded me time could be both comfort and warning. I held the receipts, the sea glass I kept as a charm, the printed emails, and I whispered to myself, "They will not rewrite me. Not quietly. Not easily. Not this time." I called Nurse Helen and left a calm message. She called back with the steadiness of someone who understood the shape of danger. "Do not sign anything," she said. "And do not assume this is small." The ocean outside stretched wide and indifferent, but inside that cabin, something in me sharpened. I was no longer a man hoping to be safe. I was a man preparing to prove what had been done. And I knew, with a certainty that did not waver, that I would not vanish into any story they tried to write for me. I would stand in my own pages. I woke before sunrise, the ship humming beneath me like a creature with its own pulse. The sky over the Atlantic was pale and violet, the kind of color that usually softens a man. But that morning, the world looked like warning. I stepped onto the balcony with my coffee, gripping the railing just long enough to remember the words I'd overheard. When he's at sea, it'll look like an accident. The metal felt colder than the wind. I pulled my hand back. I would not give them the satisfaction of imagining how easy it could have been. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from Nurse Helen. I put it on speaker and listened as the ship cut through the waves. Henry, I checked your file. There's a guardianship form with your name on it, signed 6 months ago. You didn't sign that. I know your handwriting. Someone forged it. My knees went weak for a moment, but I stayed standing. I'd suspected abuse. I hadn't expected guardianship. That meant legal control, financial access, medical authority. It meant someone had tried to turn me into an old man without rights, a man whose decisions could be overruled by the son he raised. When the voicemail ended, I breathed slowly and let the wind cut across my face. I didn't cry. I didn't swear. I said one sentence under my breath. All right, let's see how deep this goes. I carried the phone to the small desk and replayed the message so I could record it on Elijah's device. He nodded when he heard it, his jaw tightening in a way that made him look younger than his 70 years. Guardianship papers don't show up by accident, he said. You're dealing with someone who's not just desperate. He's organized. I told him I wanted to check the ship's internet again. We went to the library on Deck 7, found an empty terminal, and I logged into my online banking. My chest tightened as the page loaded. The numbers were lower than I remembered. Withdrawals in the thousands. Notes referencing loan repayment that I had never authorized. Payments I had not made. My name appearing next to transactions marked in red. It was like reading a stranger's life wearing my signature. Elijah leaned in closer. Henry, this isn't carelessness. This is deliberate. The cursor blinked in the center of the screen. The ship rocked lightly. The world blurred for 1 second, and I felt something inside me shift, not break shift. Like a door had finally swung open, and I could see what had been behind it all along. The signs I'd ignored, the excuses I'd accepted, the quiet erosion of trust. Then came the next blow. An email pinged in my inbox as we watched. Mortgage evaluation approved. I hadn't applied for a mortgage in 20 years. I opened the attachment with shaking hands. It listed my address, my income, my birth date, and a signature that was supposed to be mine. A hollow, hurried imitation. I breathed in through my nose and out through my teeth until my pulse came back to something steady. Elijah reached over slowly and pressed the print button. Evidence, he said softly. Every piece matters. We stepped out onto the deck afterward, the sunlight sharp against the water. I held the stack of printed pages under my arm like armor. As we walked, I noticed a man again, the one from the day before, the one who watched me for too long in the dining room. Today he wore a navy jacket, but the posture was the same. He walked with no urgency, always staying 1 or 2 lengths behind me, pretending to look at the ocean whenever I glanced back. Elijah pretended not to notice, but I could feel him tracking the man's movements at the edge of his vision. Don't panic, he whispered. Make him think you haven't seen him. I nodded and kept walking. My heart, though, had its own ideas. It beat faster with every step. The ship was enormous, but it suddenly felt very small. At noon, my phone rang. Mark. His name lit up the screen like a warning flare. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, Dad. How's the cruise? You meeting people? Eating well? The cheeriness was too sweet, rotting at the center. I'm settling in, I said calmly. The ship is bigger than I expected. He laughed. Don't tire yourself out. You get dizzy sometimes, remember? Maybe stay near the railings when you walk at night. There's always a breeze to keep you steady. I felt my stomach drop. I glanced at Elijah, who stared at me with eyes widening. We both knew what Mark meant. I swallowed. I'll be careful, I said. Thanks for the advice. That pause before he said goodbye told me everything. He wasn't checking in, he was checking progress. After the call, Elijah sat with me by the railing far back, sheltered from the edge. Henry, if he's coordinating something, he'll want updates. You need to give him just enough to keep him talking. He suggested recording every call, every voicemail, every hint. The more he says, the clearer his intentions become. That night, the ship rocked gently under a blue twilight. I walked to the bar with Elijah, trailing casually behind me. We had agreed on a plan, a test. I would look slightly unsteady, like a man who had enjoyed dinner a little too much. Vulnerable, predictable, a perfect target. I leaned on the counter and ordered a lemonade with a twist of lime. I let my elbow wobble slightly. I dropped a napkin on purpose. And sure enough, within minutes, the man in the navy jacket approached. "Sir," he said, "you all right? You seem tired." His eyes searched my face, then drifted to the wrist where I wore my old watch. "I'm fine," I replied lightly. "Just feeling the ship move. My son said the railings are the best place to get fresh air at night." He smiled then too quickly, too satisfied. "Your son is right. Those decks are quiet, peaceful. You should take advantage of that." He sat down beside me. "Too close, too curious. Which cabin are you in? Maybe I can help you find your way after." I lifted my drink and forced a chuckle. 847, I said, pretending to forget the last digit, then correcting myself. "I'm terrible with numbers these days." His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I saw the real expression behind his face. The calculation, the math of a man measuring risk. Before he could ask more, I excused myself and said I needed rest. Elijah waited at the corner of the hall, his expression tight. "He followed you," he whispered. "He went straight to the public phone after you left and made a call." I couldn't hear the words, but I saw his posture change, like he'd just confirmed something important. I felt my breath hitch. The ship's hallway stretched long and dim. The hum of the engine vibrated beneath my feet. That night, my phone buzzed again. A hospital billing alert. I opened it, and my heart pounded. A medical charge under my name signed digitally. I hadn't been in a hospital in months. The signature was forged. The date last week. Helen messaged me soon after. "Henry, that bill wasn't an accident. Someone is using your identity. You're being targeted." I stared at the screen as the ship tilted slightly on a swell. My cabin felt smaller with every revelation, and I understood, finally, that this wasn't just a cruel plan. It was a plan that had been growing for months, quietly, carefully, a net tightening around me, one signature at a time. I sat at the desk, holding my watch and the sea glass. I whispered to the empty room, "Not today. Not like this." And I began writing down every detail, dates, voices, faces, emails, conversations, all of it. Because if they were building a story where I disappeared, I was building the evidence that would bring them to justice. The next morning, the sky over the Atlantic was the color of pewter, dull, heavy, warning of something shifting beneath the surface. I woke in Elijah's cabin, not my own, because neither of us trusted what might happen if I spent another night alone. The ship's intercom announced breakfast, but my stomach was twisted into a knot that food couldn't loosen. I stayed sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring at the small table where our printed evidence lay, in neat stacks. Emails, forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, guardianship papers. My life reduced to documents proving I had been slowly erased. Elijah handed me a cup of coffee. "Henry, today we tighten the net." He said it with the calm of a man who had spent a lifetime reading motives in boardrooms and courtrooms. I nodded and steadied my breath. I wasn't trembling from fear anymore. I was trembling from clarity. We decided our first stop would be the security wing. Not to reveal everything, just enough to create a record in case things spiraled. The security office was tucked behind a door marked "Staff Only," guarded by a man who looked like he'd seen everything and trusted nothing. His name tag read, Officer Reyes. He guided us inside with cautious eyes. "I'd like to file a concern," I said, sliding one printed paper across the desk, a transaction under my name for a medical service I had never received. Reyes frowned. "Sir, this is a hospital bill. Why bring it here?" "Because someone forged my signature. Someone who knows I'm on this ship. Someone who believes I won't return." Reyes lifted his eyes slowly to mine. For a moment, nothing moved, not his breath, not his posture. Then he said, "Do you know who would have reason to do this?" "Yes," I said. But I can't prove the full scope yet. Not without recording a few more things. I kept my voice steady, giving just enough, holding the rest. All I need is for you to be aware that I'm vulnerable. That someone may attempt access to my cabin without my consent. Reyes leaned back. We'll place your room on observation. Quietly. Anything else you want noted? I slid one more page across the guardianship form with the forged signature. His jaw tightened. Sir, this is felony-level fraud. I know. He studied my face a moment longer, then nodded. We'll keep an eye on it. But be careful. If someone is moving this quietly, they won't stop now. When we stepped back into the hallway, the air felt colder. Elijah placed a steady hand between my shoulder blades. You handled that well. I don't feel well, I admitted. I feel like I've been living in a story someone else wrote for me. And now, he replied, you're rewriting it. We walked toward the upper deck, where the air was clearer. Families lounged in deck chairs. Children played by the pool. Couples held hands at the railings. It was strange watching life continue with such innocence, while mine had been rewritten into a ledger of betrayal. I sat at a table, shaded by a blue umbrella. Elijah sat across from me, scanning the deck like a sentinel. At 11 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Walker. Henry, I pulled credit checks. You didn't apply for the loan. Someone used your SIN number, likely tied to the guardianship document. This is coordinated. Coordinated. The word felt like a lock clicking into place. Before I could reply, another text came, this one, from Mark. Hey Dad, just checking in. You enjoying the breeze on the upper decks? I froze. Elijah leaned forward. He knows where you are. I typed back slowly. Yes, it's beautiful up here. Peaceful. His response came in seconds. Be careful leaning over. People slip. Especially older folks. Don't want anything happening to you. I read the words twice. Not because I didn't understand them. Because I did. Elijah whispered. He's checking the schedule. He needs to know when you'll be alone. I swallowed the bitter taste rising in my throat and typed. Don't worry. I'm always careful. No punctuation. No emotion. Nothing an investigator could twist. After lunch, we decided to revisit the library computers. I wanted to check my email again. The connection was slow, and I was tapping my fingers when a new message appeared from an unfamiliar sender. Document review. My hands went cold. I opened it, and a single PDF stared back. A new will. My name. My assets. My house. My pension. All listed under Estate Transition Planning. Beneficiary. Mark Harrison. Secondary beneficiary. Laura Harrison. Date. 2 months ago. Signature. Forged. My chest tightened so sharply that Elijah reached across and gripped my wrist. Henry, he whispered. Breathe. Breathe. I forced air into my lungs. The room tilted slightly, with the sway of the ship. That, he said quietly, is the heart of the motive. I forwarded the file to Detective Walker, then printed a copy. The librarian eyed us curiously, but we kept our expressions neutral. I tucked the papers into an envelope and slid them into my jacket. On our way back to the cabin, I noticed movement in the hallway, a shadow, then a figure stepping out from behind the corner. The man in the navy jacket. He paused when he saw me. Then he smiled, too casually. Evening, sir, he said. Rough waters today. Dangerous to be out alone. Something in his voice had changed. There was no pretense now. Only timing. Elijah stepped forward slightly, putting his body between us. We're heading to a meeting, he said sharply. Excuse us. The man held my gaze a fraction too long before stepping aside. Once we were out of earshot, Elijah whispered, the timing's accelerating. We have to get ahead of him. Back in the cabin, I paced. I couldn't stop. My thoughts spun like the ship's turbines. I kept seeing the will, the guardianship, the forged bills, the forged signature, the jacketed man's smile. Elijah finally said, Henry, call him. I stopped moving. Call who? Your son. Let him tell on himself. I stared at him. The idea terrified me. But it also made something in me settle. If Mark was confident, he'd slip. If he slipped, we'd catch it. I sat down on the edge of the bed and dialed. He answered instantly, as though he'd been staring at the phone, waiting. "Dad, how's the day going?" There was cheer in his voice. Manufactured cheer. I pushed air into my lungs. "Mark," I said quietly, "did you change anything in my will?" Silence. 2 seconds. 3. 4. Then he laughed. Forced. "What?" "No. Dad, are you okay? You sound confused." My eyes closed for one moment. "Did you sign anything in my name?" Another pause. Longer. "Dad, you know you forget things sometimes." Maybe you did. There it was. The shift. The slip. The moment where denial turned into an accusation. I kept my voice steady. "I didn't forget." "Well," he said, tone sharpening, "if you don't remember signing, that's kind of concerning, isn't it? Maybe we should talk when you're home. Maybe you need rest." I looked at Elijah, who was already recording the call. Mark's voice dropped lower. "Just relax on the cruise. Everything's handled." Handled. The word tasted poisonous. After the call ended, Elijah exhaled slowly. "We have him. Not everything, but enough to prove intent." The ship rocked slightly, as if the sea were nodding with us. I sat on the bed, staring out at the horizon. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a man preparing the final chapter. Because sooner or later, this wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about justice. The fourth morning rose sharp and bright over the Atlantic. But inside me, everything felt darker, quieter, more precise, as if my mind had finally settled into the shape it needed to take. Elijah stood at the balcony window of his cabin, coffee in hand, watching the light cross the water. I watched him instead, his calm, the way he carried certainty like an old soldier carries experience. "Today," he said softly, "is the day we stop reacting and start acting." I nodded. I'd spent most of my life trying to keep the peace, pretending silence was a virtue. But on this ship, silence had become a weapon someone else was using against me. Elijah laid out the plan on the little cabin table between us, 4 printed pages, color-coded. Evidence here, timeline here, risk assessment here, and the final page, the one he tapped twice, exposure strategy. "We need the right audience," he said, "the right moment, and the right authority present. Chaos won't help us. Clarity will." He was right. If Mark had spent months forging paperwork, manipulating finances, rehearsing my undoing, then this confrontation had to be executed with precision. I took a long breath and let it out slowly. "Who do we start with?" "The captain." The captain's office sat tucked behind a glass door on deck 4, overlooking the sea like a watchtower. Captain McKinley was a tall man with steady eyes and a kind of authority that made you straighten your posture without being told. He let us in, then really listened as Elijah spoke first, laying the groundwork. Suspicious man shadowing me. Financial discrepancies. Guardianship forgery. Then I placed the forged will on his desk. McKinley didn't move for almost 10 seconds. Then he lifted the corner of the document with 2 fingers, the way someone handles something fragile or dangerous. "Mr. Cole," he said, using my last name with a weight that made my heart tighten. "You understand, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is organized criminal behavior." "I know," I whispered. "Do you have reason to believe someone on this ship is acting on your son's behalf?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "We've had incidents before. Fraud, identity theft, even staged accidents. But this," he exhaled slowly, "this is premeditation." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Officer Reyes, to my office immediately." Reyes arrived in under a minute, eyes sharp, posture rigid. Elijah handed him a second stack. Screenshots of messages, email headers, the hospital bill. Reyes flipped through, stopped at the guardianship form, and swore under his breath. "Captain, this is enough for a criminal case on land." "And on this ship," McKinley said, "it's enough for intervention." I watched the two of them for a moment, the way authority met experience, the way professionalism met human anger. For the first time since boarding, I felt something like safety. Then came the part Elijah had warned me would hurt. "Mr. Cole," the captain said gently, You need to hear this. The man who has been following you? We've seen footage. He's gone near your cabin door 3 times in the last 24 hours. How close? I whispered. Close enough to try the handle. I swallowed. Elijah put a hand on my shoulder. This ends today, he said. The captain drafted the plan, a controlled scenario. A trap. Tonight was the captain's reception gala. Hundreds of guests. Music. Lights. Champagne. A perfect distraction. While I made a visible appearance at the beginning of the event, a security team would monitor my real movements. My cabin would be placed under surveillance. The man would be watched. And, if he attempted to enter, even for a second, he would be caught. Are you comfortable playing the decoy? McKinley asked. I looked at Elijah. Then at the forged documents spread across the desk like a map of my betrayal. Yes, I said quietly. I'm done hiding. By sunset, the ship glowed with gold and silver lights. Passengers moved in elegant clothes along the corridors, music drifting in soft ribbons. I wore a suit, the color of slate, with a tie my wife had given me years ago. It felt like armor and memory all at once. At the top of the grand staircase, Elijah squeezed my shoulder once. You won't be alone, he said. Not for a second. The plan began. I stepped into the ballroom. Murmured greetings. A few smiles. A photo near the ice sculpture. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting myself be seen. Elijah drifted nearby, pretending to admire the string quartet. Captain McKinley watched from the bar. Officer Reyes stood by the entrance, phone in hand, pretending to check the Gala program. And then, the man in the navy jacket entered. He scanned the room. His eyes found me. He didn't smile. He just nodded once, as if confirming a schedule. I turned away, letting him believe what he wanted. After 10 minutes, Elijah touched my elbow. It's time. We slipped out through the side door. Reyes followed at a distance. The hallway felt impossibly quiet after the music. Only the hum of the ship, the faint vibration of engines, up one level, down another, into the crew corridor. Then, Elijah's cabin. I shut the door behind us and waited. Elijah pulled out his phone, opened the security app the captain had given him. 3 screens appeared, each showing the hallway outside my cabin from different angles. We watched. 9:46 p.m. Nothing. 9:52 p.m. A couple strolled past, laughing. 10:07 p.m. A crew member pushing a laundry cart. 10:12 p.m. Then, a shadow. A figure stepped into frame. The man. He looked down both ends of the hallway. No hesitation. No fear. Only certainty. He pulled gloves from his pocket and slipped them on. Elijah whispered, "Here we go." The man approached my cabin. He crouched, took out a small tool, inserted it into the lock. Ray's voice crackled through the earpiece the captain had given Elijah. "We have visual confirmation. All units move." The man pressed his ear to the door, turned the tool. The lock clicked. He slipped inside. Elijah and I watched the blurry figure enter, watched him scan the room, watched him step toward the balcony. He opened the sliding door and inspected the railing, as if measuring the angle of a fall. My stomach twisted. Elijah gripped my shoulder. "Stay with me. You're safe." Then the hallway cameras lit up security officers, moving in a swift, coordinated sweep. 3 officers, silent and controlled. Footage flickered. They entered my cabin. Shouts. A crash. The man stumbled backward onto the camera frame, shock on his face. Then anger. Then the wild panic of someone who finally understood the trap had been set for him, not me. McKinley himself stepped into view. "Sir," he said on camera, "you are under arrest for attempted harm of a passenger." The man thrashed once, twice, then Reyes immobilized him with terrifying efficiency. Elijah exhaled slowly. "That's it, Henry. That's the moment. We have him." "And Mark?" I whispered. "We get him next." 10 minutes later, McKinley called us to the security office. The man sat in restraints, eyes darting like a trapped animal. On the table lay his phone unlocked. Message thread open. Mark Harrison. He should be back in his cabin after the gala. Do it quickly. No sign of struggle. Check the balcony. That's the cleanest method. Once it's done, message me immediately. My hands shook, but they didn't tremble. They curled into fists. McKinley spoke gently. Mr. Cole, this is enough for prosecution. Real prosecution. Your son won't walk away from this. Elijah watched me carefully. Henry? I closed my eyes. Let the truth settle. I had not come on this cruise to die. I had come, unknowingly, to uncover the truth. And now, it was time to bring the truth home. Because justice wasn't something I had to hope for anymore. Justice had become something I was walking toward. When dawn broke on the 5th day, it wasn't gentle. It cut through the horizon like a blade, sharp, honest, unavoidable. Elijah and I stood at the cabin window watching the first light turn the waves silver. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. What happened the night before had changed the air between us. Heavier, clearer. The ship's intercom announced breakfast. People laughed in the hallway, planned excursions, talked about the weather. Life moved normally, even while mine sat open like a wound. I stared at my hands steady for the first time in years. Justice wasn't an idea anymore. It had begun moving, piece by piece, evidence clicking into place. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. Detective Walker. Henry, he said, voice tight. I've reviewed the footage and the messages. Your son won't talk his way out of this. When you land in Boston tomorrow, we go straight to the station. Is it really that solid? Airtight. Guardianship fraud. Identity theft. Forged medical billing. Attempted murder. Everything. The truth didn't scare me. It didn't comfort me. It simply settled something inevitable, long overdue. When I hung up, Elijah watched me quietly. Something's still heavy on you, he said. I raised him, I whispered. Taught him everything. I never thought my story would end in a courtroom, with him on the other side of it. Elijah nodded. Sometimes the people we love mistake our kindness for permission. Before noon, Captain McKinley summoned us. He had phone logs, passenger statements, timestamps, all arranged like a trial waiting to happen. The attacker had confessed. Mark had paid him. They'd planned it for weeks. You'll leave the ship under security escort, McKinley said. For your protection. I could only manage. I never thought it would be him. Later that afternoon, Mark called. Elijah pressed record. Dad, everything okay? You didn't call yesterday. No, I said. But I will be. Silence sharpened. What does that mean? It means, I know everything. I told him about the attacker, the recovered messages, the forged will, the fake guardianship, the medical bills, every lie built to erase me before I was gone. Dad, please. No. You don't get to ask me for anything anymore. I told him I'd meet Walker tomorrow. The charges were being filed. Dad, you can't, I'm your son. A son protects his father, I said. He doesn't erase him. I ended the call, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. The next morning, the ship docked. Security escorted me off discreetly. Elijah placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not the same man who boarded this ship. I know, I said. And I'm not going back. Detective Walker met me with a folder thick as a book. We went straight to the station. I gave my statement, turned over every document, every screenshot, every recording. The prosecutor took less than an hour. Arrest warrants. Mark Harrison. Attempted murder, identity theft, fraud, conspiracy. Laura Harrison. Co-conspiracy. Financial exploitation. They were arrested that evening while trying to leave town. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I simply breathed fully. Honestly, for the first time in months. The trial took months. I testified. Elijah testified. Officers testified. The attacker confessed again under oath. Mark never met my eyes. Not once. The verdict was clear. Mark, 18 years. Laura, 8. When the judge read the sentence, something inside me released, not joy, not vengeance, something quieter. I am still here. And I did not disappear the way they planned. After the trial, I sold the house where the memories were too loud. I moved to a small apartment near the harbor. I walked the pier in the mornings. I volunteered with older adults who survived family exploitation. Elijah visited twice. We sat by the water, drinking tea. Once, he said, Survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the man you choose to be next. So I chose differently. A man who no longer bends until he breaks. A man who doesn't confuse love with obligation. A man who understands that justice is not revenge. It's truth, spoken aloud. And if you're hearing my voice across Canada or beyond, I hope you hear this. Blood is not a shield. Silence is not love. And betrayal inside. A family demands truth, not quiet. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on fractured vengeance. And before you go, what city are you listening from?